scientists, and commanders, an elite team.
What's up, Lore Masters? In this review, we're going to be looking at Lower Decks' very first episode, Second Contact. One of the advantages of waiting to do these reviews, giving it a couple of episodes, is you understand where they were going, as well as what they want overall, at least to a moderate degree. Before we do though, let's address some criticisms. The first criticism that you often hear is that someone finds something within this first episode that goes against Legacy Trek.
Selling Starfleet technology without the express consent of the Federation Council is the breach of Regulations 498 and 756.
The fact is, while you can point out a quote here and there that does seem to contradict Lower Decks, there is literally nothing within this series so far that the main cast of the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and on haven't done themselves. It is either because of blind hatred or an ignorance that allows this claim to continue. Additionally, this episode specifically is quite consistent with what we see of the Lower Decks when they've been focused on in the other series, specifically Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager.
Thank you so much. Can I just say that I'm really honored to be...
Keep it moving, Lower Decks.
Broccoli makes me nervous, Captain. He makes everybody nervous.
Broccoli. Young Mr. Crusher started that. I guess it's caught on.
They're not laid out properly.
I realize they're not the same as on the bridge, but I had to make some changes because...
I need to be able to ascertain our status at a glance. If you cannot carry out my orders, I will find someone who can.
Keep it moving, Lower Decks.
So with that addressed, let's get into it. The very first episode introduces us to the main characters we will be seeing. This includes Mariner, Boimler, Rutherford, and Tendi. Throughout the episodes, at least to the point of this recording, Tendi gets by far the least amount of time, and Rutherford has interesting, if not brief arcs, but nothing substantial. The focus is generally going to be on Mariner and Boimler. From what I can tell, they are the two main protagonists and thus get most of the camera time. Mariner is a senior officer washout that has lost all belief in Starfleet's higher brass. By contrast, Boimler is a by-the-book officer that wants to be a captain at some point. Rutherford is a half-cyborg engineer who loves everything technical and would die inside of a warp core engine if he had the choice. And Tendi is a new medical officer that is excited to be a part of the final frontier. There are at least 3 story arcs that are within this episode. Each of them do have a resolution, and because of that, they feel a bit short when you break them down. The first is the exhilaration of being on a starship and the magical feeling you get when you are finally a scientist and explorer. The next is realizing that sometimes what Starfleet policy is and what Starfleet is meant to be are two different things.
We've been serving together for a year, and I still don't get why you worship those guys.
They're heroes.
And the last arc shows us that this is going to be a series that does have fun with common tropes that we've seen in the past.
On your date?
Nah, that stuff happens all the time.
Oh, good.
Breaking down the plot specifically, we do see Boimler and Mariner, who are two dramatically different people. One believes that you have to follow the rules no matter what, and the senior officers are gods, and the other believes that the senior officers are jerks who don't care about anyone, and that you have to take matters into your own hands to get it taken care of. Both of them ultimately are wrong. Now, I will admit that the antics that we see in this episode are probably the closest to Rick and Morty humor that we've gotten so far.
You got this. It is getting tired, so go to your happy place. Like, oh, think about the warp core.
But luckily, it's not too bad, and hopefully we don't see anything like it in the future. The only real flaw of this arc, if we can call it a flaw, is the focus is generally on Mariner and how right she is versus Boimler being wrong. For the story itself, it does make sense, and in future episodes, we will see where she eats humble pie, where she is wrong. And to be fair, we don't need it to be balanced in the same episode, but for the first one, I could see some people being concerned. Looking at the next arc, the whimsical and magical nature of Tendi is probably one of the best parts of the episode. It's a good way of showing the elements of the starship and what Trek is meant to be. Because honestly, I think sometimes we forget what Trek was. It was an exploration. It was wonders. It was going out and finding new civilizations. And we can finally remember that through Tendi. The last arc is kind of a meme. It shows Rutherford in a catastrophic life-ending event on the ship that should result in everybody not surviving, and him talking about how that actually happens quite a bit. It's something that we all know, but is never highlighted in previous series. It's kind of funny. The largest problem you'll have is likely the artistic style or humor. It's not laugh out loud funny for most, but it is entertainingly funny if that makes sense. If you start this out being adverse to adult cartoons, I've said it before, but you're probably not going to like it. I know this review was a bit of high level, but that's really all the episode was. It was meant to give you a bit of a taste of what's going to be happening. In future episodes, I'll be getting into the very plots themselves and breaking down the nitty-gritty, because those actually have depth. But I'm interested. Let me know what you guys thought of the very first episode.
Ooh, this is the new shuttle with the blast shield! Yeah! The blast
Stop it.
shield
No,
is the
it
blast
works.
shield. When
Yeah,
it
it
comes
works.
down and it
You
goes
don't
up,
have to.
blast
Stop it.
shield!
What's up, lore masters? Today we'll be taking a look at the next episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, specifically Envoys. In this episode, we have Boimler and Mariner effectively doing an escort mission that will cause all kinds of havoc, and Rutherford having the first tinges of a thing for Tendi. But before that, we have to get to where I do the thing. The thing where I address criticisms that are quite frequent, but because random commenters or viewer X hasn't seen them, they get all upset about it, saying I should just ignore it. God, I love the internet. So one of the unfortunate problems that this series has is that a lot of the critics have been so stung with Picard and Discovery, have been so beaten down by it, that they've forgotten nuance. To put it simply, Star Trek Lower Decks may be a bit too subtle for those who jump in front of a camera immediately after watching it. Like Trek before it, you have to look for a deeper sense sometimes.
Yes, I'm very complicated, thank you.
To that point, let me address one of the largest complaints in the critics that I've seen. It's the point where Boimler is made to look like an idiot here, and Mariner is so much better than him. However, unfortunately, I think many who say this are missing the forest for the trees. Boimler, in this episode at least, isn't an idiot. There are quite a few points where he shows that he is intelligent, or at least knows what he is doing.
Sure, yeah. If Tolganafor wasn't protected by an ion field that restricts comms and transporters. Well, they're Kalons, and Kalons are notoriously isolationist. And, a Taxor, right. And they communicate through guttural tones. Andorians were a founding member of the Federation. Please don't explain them to me. Tolganan security requires all shuttlecraft to provide a secure landing code.
The reason why he gets one-upped so much in this specific arc is because he is put into a situation that he's not ready for. Also, curiously, when you break it down, some of the things Mariner does creates an intriguing discussion. It does come down to how you want to look at it. Why exactly did she insert herself into the mission that Boimler had been assigned to? One of the reasons could have been that Boimler was out of his element, that Mariner realized the general enjoyed stealing things, wanted to fight all the time, and she was there to help Boimler out, knowing that he wouldn't be able to handle it. Or she could have had an issue with how Boimler takes everything. She sees herself in him, or she likes him, and just cannot understand why he wants to be a part of the senior staff when he was more effective as Lower Decks. I think either interpretation is pretty believable and an interesting way to look at all of this. Ultimately, she does have herself assigned to the escort mission, and through a turn of events, fights the Klingon, gets drunk with him, and then both her and Boimler are left on the planet as he steals the shuttle. They both would have an inability to recall the ship and would have to go through various events that range from the funny to the not so funny in an attempt to figure out where he is. Unfortunately for Boimler, they would have to be back within a certain time before facing a court-martial. Ultimately, Mariner does get them out of every situation, which causes a complete and utter breakdown for Boimler.
Just turn in my uniform and go work on a research asteroid.
No, absolutely not. Do not even joke about that.
The one thing I will agree with when it comes to the critics is that these episodes, at least up to episode 5 or 6, seem very focused on telling Mariner's story. She takes precedent a lot. Now, that's not to say the other characters don't shine or that it's even bad. A lot of times, Picard, Sisko, and Janeway were overexplored as well. But for the moment, it just seems their goal to show us Mariner. And again, that doesn't make her a Mary Sue, it just has a focus on one character. As stated, Boimler is completely devastated and thinking of transferring out, though Mariner would create a situation where she looks like the idiot and restores his faith in himself.
And then she says, get this, she says, oh no, that's a Bolian.
Unfortunately, the episode does feel the need to tell us that it was all staged when really you could see it before, but it is a cartoon. When it comes to Rutherford and Tindy, as we will see in quite a few episodes, they just seem like minor characters that the writers don't know what to do with. The one thing I did enjoy about Rutherford's arc here is the jokes and the senior staff being very upbeat and optimistic about his transferring in and out of departments, trying to figure out who he wants to be. After all, in all of Trek, it does seem like transfers aren't all that hard to do and you can be whatever you want to be. But the plot with Rutherford trying to do what's best for Tindy but wanting to be something else just seems like a minor story arc, and to be frank, we're going to see that quite a bit in the first season. I wish they were given more to do in these episodes, but they just aren't. The second foray into the life of the lower decks does a decent job of establishing who and what the characters are. We see that Mariner is a character that doesn't read the manuals and likes doing things outside of the box. Boimler loves staying in the box and is actually quite useful if he's there. Tindy is still your doe-eyed lover of everything space, and Rutherford is someone who is falling for our girl Tindy and trying to find himself in a way. Right now, we really haven't seen a lot of deep and philosophical Trek, which I know a lot of people want, but it is a slow burn, so stay tuned. But all that said, in the end, a fairly decent episode.
Strength is at 100%.
Oh, you almost phasered me!
Calm down. It's set to, it was set to stun.
What's up, lore masters? Like in all of these videos, I'm going to be breaking down the actual episode, giving my thoughts about what I enjoyed, talking about what I didn't like, as well as addressing common criticisms. To be succinct, I think this episode does a good job of showing how Mariner isn't always the focus, can actually be wrong, and how Boimler is a hero. And to be completely upfront, I also think that this episode is the perfect portrayal of how it, along with New Trek, isn't really what Roddenberry would have wanted and can somewhat exemplify why some might not like it. If you grew up under the original series and or the Next Generation, you were told that humanity was the best of the best. While there were exceptions, even exemptions here and there, the people we observed were really just humanity at its pinnacle. And the inference, if not outright stating, was that this was commonplace, that most people were like this. Now, if you were watching closely, the shows never bared that out, like at all. But if you didn't look into it, then the impression was given, and that's what you thought. Now, to be fair, DS9 along with Voyager had strong leadership, but they did lean more towards a flawed humanity, though still heroic. And Enterprise, well, Enterprise was a show that existed. Anyway, for those who saw and believe that mantra, this episode, Temporal Edict as it's named, completely contradicts that. Now again, if you analyze the episodes of TOS and TNG, you'll see that what the dialogue wanted you to believe and what happened are two different things. But even if we disregarded that and assumed that it was true, Star Trek has always had continuity issues. So for many, if not most, the way the senior staff acts in this episode, and the series really, being brutal, uncompromising, and possibly idiotic, can be justified or ignored. That said, I did want to note it because I think it's only fair to discuss that. Looking at the episode proper, it begins with the Cerritos making its way to be a part of a once-in-a-lifetime peace accord, when they are, unfortunately, diverted. This angers the captain, who goes on a tear and ultimately discovers that officers in the lower decks have something called buffer time.
What is buffer time?
Buffer time, effectively, is where officers in the lower decks will ultimately lie about how long something might take. This gives them more time to relax or to get different things done. When the episode first aired, I did see a lot of criticism over this, but honestly, it's just a reference to what Scotty said in TNG, where you overestimate how long something takes. I also have a very hard time thinking that most senior staff are unaware of this methodology. They were all lower decks at one time, after all, and I doubt things have changed that much. Also, it's pretty logical that while you can't take all day for simple tasks, you can't have the senior staff being slave drivers either. There has to be a middle ground. Anyway, back to the episode. The captain demands that people stop all bumper time and get things done immediately, creating a very, very authoritarian mechanism around the process. This causes absolute pandemonium on the ship. No one is able to get anything done, and things are falling behind and falling apart. Here is where you're going to have to accept that you're watching a cartoon comedy versus that of a live-action drama. This plot, if it were done on TNG, would probably have the writers creating a situation where the crew look very tired. They begin to make mistakes and are irritable, and then a major catastrophe occurs with someone learning a valuable lesson. I truly believe that's how the original series and The Next Generation would have handled it. However, Lower Decks is not a live-action drama. It's a cartoon comedy. So they're going to amp up everything with the ship seeming to be on red alert, people screaming that they don't know where to go and things not getting done, and everyone on the razor's edge. Both of these scenarios are telling you the same thing, giving you the same type of message, just in a different style. So if you accept that it's meant to be a comedy, then it being in canon through that lens is more digestible. Regardless of how you look at it though, the ship has everyone freaking out, everyone except Boimler. The ensign takes it all in stride, even going above and beyond. For me, this episode, the third one in the series, really disproves some of the complaints that we commonly see about the series. Boimler shines here. He's the hero and saves the ship. While going through his tasks, he is hitting it out of the park. And to top it all off, during this time, the Cerritos is invaded by a crystal-loving people. The ship begins to be overrun because people are not allowed to stop what they're doing to protect the ship. Now that is completely stupid. And again, it's a cartoon, so you're going to have to let that go. But looking at Boimler, who is ahead of the game at this point, realizes what is going on and even how to defeat the invaders.
Yeah, but I have a phaser. These guys are lightweights.
Which is pretty easy. He then makes his way to the bridge and convinces the captain that bumper time is necessary and that the crew is great if they're given this extra time. He points out that she did run the ship quite well, and she needs to, if you'll forgive the irony here, just relax.
You're a great captain. Let them be a great crew.
The captain, realizing her error, tells the crew to focus on the invaders and then reinstates bumper time. In fact, she even creates a policy to ensure that everyone is well rested and can be at their best. She grows as a captain and a character. As I said, Boimler is the hero.
To be honest,
We could have just beamed down.
I didn't catch that, Mariner.
Yeah, I just said we should get going. Clock is ticking, productivity, and etc.
So let's take a look at Mariner. Rewinding just a minute, Mariner is getting her butt kicked by the removal of bumper time. She's not handling it well. She is also assigned to an away mission with the XO for a second contact and peaceful relations. They're supposed to show crystals to them to show that they're serious and to welcome them as a Starfleet member. Unfortunately, due to the removal of bumper time, mistakes are being made, and these crystal-loving people are shown a piece of wood, which apparently means that Starfleet is at war, I guess, with a planet that's a Starfleet member that was just signed in. This will also be the same species that will attempt to invade the Cerritos with the, I don't know what the hell they have, spears of some sort. Apparently, if you're a Starfleet member planet, then you can't use your phasers as self-defense, because I guess you don't want to continue the war, or you don't want to hurt the people that are trying to kill you. It doesn't matter, let's just keep going. The XO, being an idiot, tries to talk his way out of the situation and is punished for his troubles.
Attention, Galrakians! I'm Commander General.
All right, that was awesome.
The away team retreats, opting not to get into the shuttle because that would make too much sense, I suppose, and they make a run for it. Of course, they are quite obviously captured. After the failed retreat and, of course, being captured, Mariner insists that she is the one to save the away team. And this is where we see a really good confrontation between the XO and the ensign.
You're so busy breaking protocol that you never look ahead. One of these days you're gonna get someone killed, Ensign.
The commander points out that Mariner never looks ahead. She doesn't try to actually find the best option to save everyone. She just does what she wants. And here comes the next piece. For all of the haters who think Mariner is a Mary Sue, in this episode, Mariner is wrong. Like we saw in the last two episodes, she is making bad decisions. Mariner and Boimler are arguably the two main characters of the entire series. Because of that, people are really willing to attack her because she is given so much screen time. But if you watch these actual episodes, she definitely is at the peak of her game. She could be Enterprise senior staff worthy, as I've stated, but that doesn't mean she isn't flawed. And in all of these episodes, we see those flaws. In fact, going back to the episode itself, the XO explains to her that she is, at her core, egotistical.
That's not my team, it's our team. But I guess you don't think that way.
She thinks that only she can solve problems. She also believes that it's her job to do so. He reminds her that it's actually his job to keep his team safe, and that all of the people there, everyone that's on that away team, is also her team. But she doesn't look at it like that. It's her versus them. She doesn't look at them as equals, and that is a massive flaw that's pointed out. She forgets that they're all working together. They are all Starfleet. Mariner is a loose cannon that doesn't look forward and isn't always the right fit for the job, but she thinks she is. And the cherry on top is that she's shown she is wrong here. The XO was the person to get this done. She doesn't have to do everything. Ultimately, because of the executive officer, the away mission is a success and the crystal-loving people forgive them. Because I guess Starfleet's at blame on that. Both Mariner and Boimler come out with a better understanding of their lives and who they are, with one shining and the other having to learn the hard way. If I do have to give one complaint though, it does feel like in future episodes we don't get a lot of the distinction between the two. Now, I don't think that this episode is an exception to the rule, but I do feel like they have more Mariner-centric episodes than Boimler-centric ones. Also, we do see what will be a continued trend is Tendi and Rutherford don't really have any major arcs and don't add a ton to what we're watching. And since this episode really didn't focus on them, I won't either. Ultimately, this show is a fun run with decent comedy and some moral messages. Definitely worth a look, but all of these are my thoughts. What are yours?
Strength is at 100%.
Oh, you almost phasered me!
Calm down. It's set to, it was set to stun.
What's up, lore masters? Like in all of these videos, I'm going to be breaking down the actual episode, giving my thoughts about what I enjoyed, talking about what I didn't like, as well as addressing common criticisms. To be succinct, I think this episode does a good job of showing how Mariner isn't always the focus, can actually be wrong, and how Boimler is a hero. And to be completely upfront, I also think that this episode is the perfect portrayal of how it, along with New Trek, isn't really what Roddenberry would have wanted and can somewhat exemplify why some might not like it. If you grew up under the original series and or The Next Generation, you were told that humanity was the best of the best. While there were exceptions, even exemptions here and there, the people we observed were really just humanity at its pinnacle. And the inference, if not outright stating, was that this was commonplace, that most people were like this. Now, if you were watching closely, the shows never bared that out, like at all. But if you didn't look into it, then the impression was given, and that's what you thought. Now, to be fair, DS9 along with Voyager had strong leadership, but they did lean more towards a flawed humanity, though still heroic. And Enterprise, well, Enterprise was a show that existed. Anyway, for those who saw and believe that mantra, this episode, Temporal Edict as it's named, completely contradicts that. Now again, if you analyze the episodes of TOS and TNG, you'll see that what the dialogue wanted you to believe and what happened are two different things. But even if we disregarded that and assumed that it was true, Star Trek has always had continuity issues. So for many, if not most, the way the senior staff acts in this episode, and the series really, being brutal, uncompromising, and possibly idiotic, can be justified or ignored. That said, I did want to note it because I think it's only fair to discuss that. Looking at the episode proper, it begins with the Cerritos making its way to be a part of a once-in-a-lifetime peace accord, when they are, unfortunately, diverted. This angers the captain, who goes on a tear and ultimately discovers that officers in the lower decks have something called buffer time.
What is buffer time?
Buffer time, effectively, is where officers in the lower decks will ultimately lie about how long something might take. This gives them more time to relax or to get different things done. When the episode first aired, I did see a lot of criticism over this, but honestly, it's just a reference to what Scotty said in TNG where you overestimate how long something takes. I also have a very hard time thinking that most senior staff are unaware of this methodology. They were all lower decks at one time after all, and I doubt things have changed that much. Also, it's pretty logical that while you can't take all day for simple tasks, you can't have the senior staff being slave drivers either. There has to be a middle ground. Anyway, back to the episode. The captain demands that people stop all bumper time and get things done immediately, creating a very, very authoritarian mechanism around the process. This causes absolute pandemonium on the ship. No one is able to get anything done, and things are falling behind and falling apart. Here is where you're going to have to accept that you're watching a cartoon comedy versus that of a live-action drama. This plot, if it were done on TNG, would probably have the writers creating a situation where the crew look very tired. They begin to make mistakes and are irritable, and then a major catastrophe occurs with someone learning a valuable lesson. I truly believe that's how the original series and The Next Generation would have handled it. However, Lower Decks is not a live-action drama. It's a cartoon comedy. So they're going to amp up everything with the ship seeming to be on red alert, people screaming that they don't know where to go and things not getting done, and everyone on the razor's edge. Both of these scenarios are telling you the same thing, giving you the same type of message, just in a different style. So if you accept that it's meant to be a comedy, then it being in canon through that lens is more digestible. Regardless of how you look at it though, the ship has everyone freaking out, everyone except Boimler. The ensign takes it all in stride, even going above and beyond. For me, this episode, the third one in the series, really disproves some of the complaints that we commonly see about the series. Boimler shines here. He's the hero and saves the ship. While going through his tasks, he is hitting it out of the park. And to top it all off, during this time, the Cerritos is invaded by a crystal-loving people. The ship begins to be overrun because people are not allowed to stop what they're doing to protect the ship. Now that is completely stupid. And again, it's a cartoon, so you're going to have to let that go. But looking at Boimler, who is ahead of the game at this point, realizes what is going on and even how to defeat the invaders.
Yeah, but I have a phaser. These guys are lightweights.
Which is pretty easy. He then makes his way to the bridge and convinces the captain that bumper time is necessary and that the crew is great if they're given this extra time. He points out that she did run the ship quite well, and she needs to, if you'll forgive the irony here, just relax.
You're a great captain. Let them be a great crew.
The captain, realizing her error, tells the crew to focus on the invaders and then reinstates bumper time. In fact, she even creates a policy to ensure that everyone is well rested and can be at their best. She grows as a captain and a character. As I said, Boimler is the hero.
To be honest,
We could have just beamed down.
I didn't catch that, Mariner.
Yeah, I just said we should get going. Clock is ticking, productivity, and etc.
So let's take a look at Mariner. Rewinding just a minute, Mariner is getting her butt kicked by the removal of bumper time. She's not handling it well. She is also assigned to an away mission with the XO for a second contact and peaceful relations. They're supposed to show crystals to them to show that they're serious and to welcome them as a Starfleet member. Unfortunately, due to the removal of bumper time, mistakes are being made, and these crystal-loving people are shown a piece of wood, which apparently means that Starfleet is at war, I guess, with a planet that's a Starfleet member that was just signed in. This will also be the same species that will attempt to invade the Cerritos with the, I don't know what the hell they have, spears of some sort. Apparently, if you're a Starfleet member planet, then you can't use your phasers as self-defense, because I guess you don't want to continue the war, or you don't want to hurt the people that are trying to kill you. It doesn't matter, let's just keep going. The XO, being an idiot, tries to talk his way out of the situation and is punished for his troubles.
Attention, Galrakians! I'm Commander General.
All right, that was awesome.
The away team retreats, opting not to get into the shuttle because that would make too much sense, I suppose, and they make a run for it. Of course, they are quite obviously captured. After the failed retreat and, of course, being captured, Mariner insists that she is the one to save the away team. And this is where we see a really good confrontation between the XO and the ensign.
You're so busy breaking protocol that you never look ahead. One of these days you're gonna get someone killed, Ensign.
The commander points out that Mariner never looks ahead. She doesn't try to actually find the best option to save everyone. She just does what she wants. And here comes the next piece. For all of the haters who think Mariner is a Mary Sue, in this episode, Mariner is wrong. Like we saw in the last 2 episodes, she is making bad decisions. Mariner and Boimler are arguably the 2 main characters of the entire series. Because of that, people are really willing to attack her because she is given so much screen time. But if you watch these actual episodes, she definitely is at the peak of her game. She could be Enterprise Senior Staff worthy, as I've stated, but that doesn't mean she isn't flawed. And in all of these episodes, we see those flaws. In fact, going back to the episode itself, the XO explains to her that she is, at her core, egotistical.
That's not my team, it's our team. But I guess you don't think that way.
She thinks that only she can solve problems. She also believes that it's her job to do so. He reminds her that it's actually his job to keep his team safe, and that all of the people there, everyone that's on that away team, is also her team. But she doesn't look at it like that. It's her versus them. She doesn't look at them as equals, and that is a massive flaw that's pointed out. She forgets that they're all working together. They are all Starfleet. Mariner is a loose cannon that doesn't look forward and isn't always the right fit for the job, but she thinks she is. And the cherry on top is that she's shown she is wrong here. The XO was the person to get this done. She doesn't have to do everything. Ultimately, because of the executive officer, the away mission is a success and the crystal-loving people forgive them. Because I guess Starfleet's at blame on that. Both Mariner and Boimler come out with a better understanding of their lives and who they are, with one shining and the other having to learn the hard way. If I do have to give one complaint though, it does feel like in future episodes we don't get a lot of the distinction between the two. Now, I don't think that this episode is an exception to the rule, but I do feel like they have more Mariner-centric episodes than Boimler-centric ones. Also, we do see what will be a continued trend is Tendi and Rutherford don't really have any major arcs and don't add a ton to what we're watching. And since this episode really didn't focus on them, I won't either. Ultimately, this show is a fun run with decent comedy and some moral messages.
You're a great captain. Let them be a great crew.
So ethical.
Nope, sorry, it does not look cool when you do it. Damn it, it does.
What's up, lore masters? When you start to analyze the Lower Decks episode, Moist Vessel, you begin to see clearly what the problem is with the show overall. That is to say, the problem's Mariner. However, it's not what you think. My problem with the ensign is the unreasonable focus on her. You see, Beckett is a great character overall. She's well thought out with drive and aspiration. She has a moral code, and most importantly, she's flawed. These issues can be seen, and they do cause her to struggle most of the time. Ironically, sometimes they do allow her to flourish, but more than not, she pays the price for having them. She has baggage while being competent. She's honestly a good aspect to the show, and that's not even a bad story arc. However, the problem is the writers have become hyper-focused on her story. This is a problem because we over-explore her issues with no resolution for an unreasonable amount of time. It's not the character, it's not even the arc that she's going through. It's just that it takes too long. To put it succinctly, Mariner's story arc is the motion picture of disco-era Trek. It is a decent story, it has great parts, they just take so fracking much time explaining it, and then re-explain it. And the horrific thing is, this is going to go on until episode 9. The creators might try to argue that this was done on purpose, that it's a build-up to the story with the payoff being episode 9. But I'd have to disagree with them, I think they overshot it. I want to be clear though, it's not that I don't like the arc, it is good. I just think we could have spent more time on other characters. Let's just get into it.
And it is a true delight to be able to work with him again.
Looking at this episode specifically, it starts off pretty poorly. Mariner, as an ensign, is assisting the senior staff and yawning while a visiting commanding officer is giving their presentation. We know that ultimately she can do this because she won't be booted off the ship, largely due to nepotism. However, I think there was a failure to really dig into her malfeasance. They keep it surface level, which is, I guess, understandable since we have an adult cartoon, but they had the opportunity to really emphasize how wrong all of this is. Ultimately, the yawning is treated as insubordination when it should be something much, much deeper. They treat it as if she had snapped accidentally with a commanding officer when this is a consistent habit of hers. I honestly hate that it wasn't more than what they made it. However, regardless of how it was treated, the yawning does embarrass the captain, who then has a one-on-one with Mariner. And we have the standard daughter-mother hatred trope, and then she leaves.
Live long and prosper.
Don't you give me that sarcastic Vulcan salute, Beckett!
In a pretty comedic way. The executive officer comes in and suggests that Mariner be given all of the worst jobs at once, which then we have a pretty cringe joke and we're off to the races.
Ooh, those are the worst jobs on the ship. Scraping carbon off of slightly harder carbon. That's Klingon prison stuff.
However, the ensign of color turns it around on them as she finds ways of making all of it fun, even the unmentionable jobs. This, of course, outrages the captain, who does the worst thing that she could do. She promotes Mariner, who absolutely hates it.
Oh, no.
I will say this, though. Mariner is juxtaposed against Boimler pretty well here. She has no interest in command and yet gets it when she breaks the rules. Boimler does can to be the best of the best and still doesn't get there. I'd say there's probably a joke about how the military operates when it comes to promotions, but I couldn't be sure. Anyway, this ultimately all comes to a head as Beckett calls out the captain. The confrontation occurring in the captain's ready room. Now, for those watching who have seen the episode, you'll probably note that I haven't talked about the alien ship. The reason for this is because, well, it's at best a C-plot. It's just a method that will get them from point A to point B. While very interesting, there isn't a lot to invest in it. Another vessel has discovered a generational ship that wandered off course. This alien race is in cryosleep, and they have some type of miracle liquid that can turn non-biological objects into biological ones. Basically, they can drop this stuff on a dead planet and turn it into a thriving ecosystem. As stated, the generation ship wandered off course and so now must be saved by the Federation. Alright, groovy. Given the find, this will give a lot of accolades to whichever captain saves this alien species. Interestingly, whether they meant to intentionally do this or not, it does lead into a theory that has long been talked about. We know that by this time, currency as we have it in the 21st century is not something Starfleet widely engages in, at least as of the upload of this video. That would mean that the major commodity would be prestige. And this kind of find, saving an entire alien race, would have a lot of prestige. We even see this as a point of contention between the captains.
Starfleet Command ought to just start engraving my name on a plaque right now. And yours too, Durango, of course.
In the end, the captain of the other vessel would be so egotistical and such a glory hog that he would put the mission in danger. And, surprise, surprise, that does lead to a large catastrophe. By moving out of position as the captain does, plating from the alien vessel is torn off and the MacGuffin juice slams into both Starfleet vessels, crippling them. Lo and behold, we do see Mariner as she truly is, mask off as it were. She can tell that there is a change in the atmosphere and moves to save her mom. Ultimately, she and the captain both work together, figure out what's going on, and stop the terraforming action on the ship. I would question why Rutherford or the XO don't know what's going on and work to resolve it, but I think we could come up with some excuses, perhaps busy with the terraforming happening where they are. To the credit of the show, I do think it shows in future episodes that all of the officers, or at least most of them, would be able to resolve this issue given enough time. But as stated, Mariner would save the day. The captain, unfortunately, would push too hard, and Beckett ultimately ends up insulting an admiral just so she can be demoted.
Whoa. I am sorry. Are you trying to say the word censors? Because to me, you're saying censors.
Again, the fact she isn't thrown out of Starfleet is probably all the captain's doing, and something that we'll definitely dig into and explore in episode 9. Anyway, Mariner insults the admiral and is back on lower decks. Let's rewind and take a look at Tendy's arc, because God forbid Lower Decks have plots for all of our characters. Generally, we're just going to have two major plots going on. Tindy's arc here is, I guess, frustrating. I know it's more meant to be played as a joke, but the fact she is so desperate to be liked is just sad. In theory, I could tie this to her being an Orion, needing to be adored and such, which is something she might not get in Starfleet a lot, especially if they found a way to ensure that her pheromones don't impact other species. Ultimately, she goes to something called an ascension. She wishes to observe it, messes it up, and makes an enemy. This drives her crazy, and she does everything she can to make him her friend. He hates her until they almost die, and she saves him. Then a funny scene happens, and we're out. I know that's pretty quick compared to Mariner, but that's literally the plot. Tindy makes someone mad, that makes Tindy sad, Tindy then makes the guy glad. Then plot end with a funny point. As I've stated, it is really sad that we aren't given a ton of depth to her or Rutherford, and we really won't see that in the future. It's my sincere hope that this is resolved in Season 2. At the end of the day, the episode is fine. It shows Mariner's arc pretty well, which is played off of Boimler and what he wants, and Tindy is at least given something to do. Rutherford barely exists, and that's all I'm going to say about him. I'd say this is probably your standard episode, except instead of Tindy having an arc, give it to Boimler.
Redward! Get out of my way! Move! Move, Jennifer!
What's up, Lore Masters? In this review, we'll be looking at the Lower Decks episode, Cupid's Errant Arrow. One of the common misconceptions when it comes to this series is that people feel Boimler is used as a punching bag, that he's openly mocked. Some critics claim that this is due to his gender and the color of his skin. I've always contended that while Boimler is one of the comedic characters in the show, true, he is not actually attacked nor mocked, really. In fact, he plays a good straight man and indeed is a good goof when the various times require. I think they do it respectfully. That said, if there was an episode where he was put in a situation to be laughed at for the sake of plot, it'd be this one. Let's just get into it.
Ensign Boimler, personal log, stardate 57601.3. The Cerritos is in orbit around Mixtus 3 to assist in a controlled demolition of an unstable moon. We're providing support to the Vancouver, a Parliament-class ship which focuses on complex, large-scale engineering projects.
Like we see with a lot of Lower Deck episodes, the main event is something seemingly pretty epic. It's a moon falling into a planet that's about to destroy said planet and kill everyone. However, as you might expect, this is just another day in the life that would happen for Starfleet. The senior and bridge crew are hyper-focused on it, true, but the Lower Decks, they're just trying to do their jobs. And ultimately, it does make sense given the universe these people live in, that these things happen all the time, so it's not a big deal. The actual plot that we will focus on as the audience is the fact that Boimler has a new girlfriend, and Mariner, due to her either having a crush on Boimler or just being a really just awful person in this respect who doesn't see Boimler with someone above his pay grade, can't believe that he's dating her. We also have Tindy and Rutherford, who are generally focused on how awesome the Cerritos and the Vancouver is, and also T-88s. We'll come back to that in a bit.
Try to start today over.
Watch out for the tail!
Mariner!
The plot with Boimler and Mariner is pretty standard fare. The African-American waifu doesn't believe that Boimler can be with the lieutenant and spends the entire episode trying to prove that she's not who she says she is. At the end of the day, I think Mariner is doing this because she cares. She doesn't want to see her friend hurt. But again, she is just garbage for why she thinks that Boimler is being duped, why she thinks he may be about to be hurt. And I have to admit, this episode also brings up some strange energies between Mariner and Boimler. While we haven't seen anything overt, I do wonder if there isn't some chemistry between the two romantically, that perhaps the two may have something that's repressed. It also could be, and is as likely, that they are just really good friends. Best friends even, as we see in this episode. I'm not one to generally ship main characters together, given how cliche that is, but I honestly would kind of like to see them together personally. That's just me, though.
Oh, when I come back with this baby, the guys in engineering are gonna flap!
Yeah, right. It's gonna be me who takes this back. I'm gonna blow their minds in medical.
Looking at the B-plot between Tindy and Rutherford, I'm really divided on this. We do get to see them actually doing something, which is good. It's the same one note that they always do, which is bad. Basically, it's, oh look, I'm a cute Orion waifu that just wants to be everyone's friend, and oh look, I'm an engineer who loves everything engineering, and that's who I am. It can be frustrating to see this throughout the series. Moving on, the two discuss their lust for these ships and then get to work on the Vancouver, where they can use the adored T-88s, a new scanning device. In fact, they are competing to see who can do the best job because the winner gets to keep one, and these scanning devices aren't even out yet. Oh yeah, there's a plot with the Vancouver engineer who promises that they get to keep them if they win in some kind of contest. I'll admit that's kind of a fun arc. You definitely should watch the episode, if for nothing else, that. In that respect, we do see an interesting commentary on what being on a ship like the Vancouver can be like. The Vancouver effectively is a stand-in for the Enterprise, so it kind of shows the toll it takes on people. At the end of the day, the medical and engineering officer find out that they are low-key criminals, which is something they celebrate, and that ends the arc between the two. Unlike Mariner and Boimler, these two rarely get to have expansion of their character, and that's unfortunate. We don't even see it here, this just happens to them.
Unfortunately, we might have to cancel the demolition.
What? Why?
Is the moon too dense?
No, it's more of a diplomatic issue.
There is also a third plot point which is the least focused on, which is ironic. It's given the least amount of significance and ironically is the most important thing happening in the area. The bridge crew are having to deal with stopping a moon from plummeting to a planet and killing everyone. I've mentioned this before. It's actually a good showing for the captain, the XO, and security chief, as we see that while the bridge crew and senior officers have their flaws, they are really capable and handle themselves well. Certainly they aren't the Enterprise, nor the Titan, but they have every right to be in the positions they are in, which is something that I think is great. If I'm being honest, Cupid's errant arrow is filler, and not even the good kind. The episode is serviceable with some funny moments, but adds very little to any of the mythos or even the series. It is definitely one of the weaker episodes. That said, it's not bad. You can enjoy yourself while watching it, just don't expect to have anything amazing happen.
Hi, can I teach you a lesson?
What's up, lore masters? Today we are going back to Lower Decks and specifically analyzing the episode Terminal Provocations. This one is somewhat unique as it does appear a bit filler with no pushing of any specific narrative or season arc. And yet, is probably the best episode when it comes to expanding what we know about Tendi and Rutherford, which continues the theme of catastrophically underutilizing these characters and relegating their expansion to episodes that don't matter. There are ultimately 3 arcs with, again ironically, the most vital one happening on the ship, basically being window dressing. To get it out of the way, the C-plot involves the bridge crew dealing with scavengers that want to collect said salvage that has been floating around for roughly over 100 years. Interestingly, while I think it is probably something Starfleet would do, to say that destroyed wreckage that had been undisturbed for a century still belongs to the Federation is... I honestly don't know how much of a leg they have to stand on. The garbage had been out there for so long, and Starfleet just now takes an interest? That said, I suppose I could see there might be vital information, or perhaps some codes that the archaic ship's computers may have that the Admiralty would be concerned about. The middle ground is for Starfleet to inspect and ensure there are no vital components or top-secret information in what is salvaged, and let the other race have it. But nah, of course they're going to say it's all theirs because... whatever. We'll come back to this plot in a bit. The semi-main plot involves Boimler and Mariner basically becoming more friends than associates or colleagues. We observe them grow together and how, when the rubber hits the road, they have each other's back.
Mariner, let's go get our choo-choo shirts.
We have choo-choo shirts?
Yeah, I made us choo-choo shirts. Come on. Choo-choo! I can't believe I actually made eye contact with one of the Zebulon sisters. Oh, God!
In this instance, a popular band, or something, is occurring on the vessel. Boimler and Mariner are bummed because they have to continue to work on the ship's core. Their friend, Fletcher, offers to finish the tasks for them while they go have some fun. I was about to take a pot shot at this, but it really happens a lot in Legacy Trek, like all the time. I guess Starfleet isn't as worried about being on the clock as some other militaries may be.
Fletcher!
Oh no,
Are you okay?
woozy.
The two come back to find Fletcher knocked out and one of the cores is missing. Reasonably, they assume that it's Delta's ship. They go to confront the most vile of Starfleet only to realize they had the wrong people. In the end, they discover that Fletcher decided to hook one of the cores up to his brain to become smarter and created
Directly to my brain and let it run so it would make me smarter.
Oh boy, that is not a good idea.
Neural pathway established.
a sentient life, I guess? Fletcher wants to blame it on a Q. Booms and Marmar aren't going to be having that. They decide to tie him up so that he won't stop them and try to get rid of the sentient unit of death. And looking at their interactions, I can see them either becoming good friends or tying this into what happened in the last episode, becoming more than just friends. They throw the thing off the ship, and let's return to that in a bit.
Float and magnet.
But what if I forget to magnet? I'll spin out into the void of space and burn up in the atmosphere of a gas giant.
Whoa, calm down.
The most well-known and enjoyed plot of this episode involves our Orion waifu-loving Rutherford and Tendi. You see, Tendi is concerned about spacewalking. She cheated through school and never had to take that test. She is afraid that she'll forget to magnet when they're out there and be sent into the void of space. Firstly, why the hell are they sending medical personnel? Second, if she did forget to magnet, they have transporters and shuttles. Homegirl is going to be okay. But Rutherford, wanting to get some of that sweet, sweet pheromone, offers to help her out with a training program that he's created.
Hi, can I teach you a lesson?
Aw, well, who's this little guy?
This is Badgie.
Finally, one of the best characters in all of Star Trek is born. Unfortunately, Rutherford is mean to the hologram, because why wouldn't you be? They're not people, and all of the plots converge. The Cerritos comes under attack, and the captain is unwilling to return fire, which, again, is pretty Starfleet, because they really don't like defending themselves. Main powers hit, and the safeties are disabled. Wait, what?
What the fuck? Computer, re-engage safety protocols.
Safety protocols are unavailable.
I have never understood this. If red alert sounds, the holodeck should be disabled. Even if we assume it uses a different power source, by the way, screw you Voyager and your nonsense explanations, everyone should be at their stations. There's no reason it should still be active. I mean, wouldn't Rutherford and Tendi be ready and waiting or needing to work on something? This situation is the most egregious that I've seen this occur, but it does happen in Legacy Trek. I don't know why Starfleet doesn't set up the systems to cut everything off. Anyway, Badgie becomes an insane monster and attempts to kill Rutherford and the Orion Beauty. I won't go much into the plot except to focus here for a second.
Put this on, we gotta blend in. We gotta keep going. Fun fact, I'm gonna rip your eyes out.
That fact wasn't fun.
A lot of people get upset about this, saying that it goes against Trek, that it's too far. And I just guess they haven't seen Star Trek the original series, Wrath of Khan, Undiscovered Country, TNG, DS9, and Voyager, if they think that is way out of line. It's silly for either side, we are Starfleet or Fandom Menace, to look at this and get upset, at least in my opinion. Regardless, that's all I'm going to say about that, because I would suggest watching it for this segment alone. It is well worth it. Looking back at Boimler and Mariner, because of the lost core, the shields are almost destroyed and weapons disabled. Luckily, they take the core and they throw it out of the ship, I guess, and it has a life and ultimately saves them. This does get our boy promoted because people who don't deserve it generally do move up in the world. At the end of the day, it was a fun romp that expanded Tendi and Rutherford and should have been something we see more of throughout the series. Hopefully, they'll use this episode and expand the characters in Season 2. We're just going to have to see.
We are so getting fired for this.
Roga Dana, are you nuts? I said, who's the all-time biggest badass, not who's a dude nobody's heard about.
Everyone knows Roga Danar.
No, they don't.
She totally outsmarted Picard, and he has amazing hair.
Well, what about Khan, right? Khan was a genetically engineered supervillain. Dude was a space seed.
What's up, lore masters? In this video, we're analyzing the Star Trek Lower Decks episode, Veritas. At the end of the day, this episode is really just having fun with the trope of Trek officers being put on trial while attempting to do the right thing and save the day. It also has an honest analysis of how things really work on a Federation starship. Let's just get into it.
Oh man, they have all of our commanders suspended in a beam!
There are two basic plots for this episode. That is of the quote-unquote trial and that of the secret Romulan mission. While they are intermixed when you watch it, I'll be separating them for the purposes of this breakdown. The first thing we'll be analyzing is the trial itself. The lower decks personnel find themselves placed into what appears to be a jail cell and hoisted up and told only to speak the truth about what has occurred in the past. How they got there is never addressed because... I don't know, quantum, I guess? They are surrounded by hostiles and a warrior begins questioning them. They try to answer the questions the menacing figure wants as the senior crew can be seen suspended in air in some form of beam. This beam looks to be holding them in very uncomfortable positions. They are forced to stand in specific ways, which I think would hurt their backs, but that's just me. As the lower decks are questioned, the warrior becomes more and more frustrated,
We got eels. There's eels over here.
threatening them and putting some of the lower decks in a tank of eels. An interesting tidbit, while eels look scary as fuck, they are actually not all that hostile, unless you scare them or you hurt them. Yeah, we'll probably come back to that in a moment. The most intriguing part of the entire trial is that it really shines a light on Starfleet starship operations. It honestly is very reminiscent of TNG's Lower Decks episode. It's not really the job of Mariner, Boimler, and the others to know what is going on. To expect them to know is unrealistic. It's their job to follow orders and trust that they are doing what's best. In a way, this feels like the Warrior is a stand-in for the Phantom Menace. The unreasonable expectations of not only Starfleet officers, but the lower decks specifically, is quite on display here. While the dialogue of the next generation would make us think that all Starfleet officers walk on water, they simply don't when you look at the episodes, even episodes in TNG. They make mistakes, they aren't sure of what's going on all the time, and well, they're only human. Not only this, but honestly, Boimler is absolutely right when he discusses the conundrum.
We're lower decks. No one ever tells us what's going on. We're not important enough to have anything to lie to you about.
You're Starfleet! Surely you must be briefed on every contingency.
Yeah, I wish. The senior officers don't always have time to keep us up to speed. Hell, sometimes they don't even know what's going on.
Most officers, and sometimes even the senior crew, don't know what's going on, and that's okay. Starfleet officers have to deal with 100 things at any given time. It would be insurmountable to run every aspect of the ship and still deal with the issue of the day. This is the exact reason Starfleet ships have hundreds, if not thousands, of people on them. I'm not going to spoil what the trial actually is, but it is entirely contrived and the use of the eels makes no sense. It's just to throw everyone off. So with that, let's look at the B-plot.
What are you two doing back here? You've drawn my attention.
Distract him with the fan dance!
I'm sorry, my what now?
Dance, boy, dance!
The plan to invade Romulan space is sketchy at best. We don't know a ton about it. There are a lot of holes. As you would expect with the lower decks personnel, they all play different parts in the story that aren't connected, and we never get a full understanding because the lower decks personnel wouldn't. The episode does a good job of showing why the lower decks wouldn't get all the information. It's just done in a comedic way. It is a comedy show. That said, we do get a good observation of what the lower decks have to go through and how in the dark they really are. We see them dealing with adversity and prove to be Starfleet. To be fair, there is a lot of fluff here, but you do get the point of where they're going. I will say that what I do like is the episode has Tendi and Rutherford shining. They get actual arcs, and it's great. What's sad is I did have to come back in the script to write this part in. This isn't the norm, but they fit so well and are written so well that when they do it, it just makes sense. I just wish they had done this the entire time. This is a great episode for Tindy and Rutherford. This episode is a comedic and good look at how operations work for those who aren't on the bridge.
Oh, pause for a second. I want to talk about Con and that thick chest, but I gotta pee.
Roga Danar.
Get the out of my face.
They're not oppressed. We raise them as food. They like it.
Well, we are delicious.
What's up, Lore Masters? Before we get into the Lower Decks episode, Crisis Point, let me address a very, very stupid argument that keeps cropping up. People have gotten upset on both sides that Mariner creates a program where she plays an antagonist to her protagonist mother, that the ensign wants to destroy her mom's ship and ultimately kill her. Those who watch this episode act so enraged and better than thou. I mean, beyond the fact that a lot of these critics get so angry on their YouTube channels as to appear to be the exact same way as the character Mariner, let's all be real with each other. Like, really real. And I'll even put myself out there to discuss this. I currently have a decent relationship with my kid's mother. Indeed, we talk about who wants them on holidays and if things need to be switched up. We're pretty lax with what's written on the paper because we make it about the kids. There's no barbs, no anger, no attacks in person. In fact, she recently had a major life event that probably would have devastated me when I was her husband. But right now, I'm pretty apathetic about it. Which is a weird experience. I literally feel nothing. It's not even numbness or anything, I just don't care. But that's neither here nor there. While it might sound odd for those who haven't been through divorce, all of this is quite the win. And I think most of whom have been through the process would understand that. Let's talk about the holodeck. While I honestly don't care at the end of the day, I'm more than happy to never see my ex again if it wasn't for the kids. If you told me I could walk into a room of magic where I could do anything, literally anything, say literally anything, to a phantom version of my ex-wife.
Wait, do you think Phillips is in here?
Yeah, probably.
So I can say whatever I want to my boss with no consequences?
Hey, wait!
Do you think that the person recording this audio right now would be the person I would allow myself to be if I could say anything with no consequences? For those who might be surprised by that question, or where I'm going, or even aghast at it, here's the dirty little secret. The thing that no one wants to admit to themselves about who we are as human beings. We all have duality of spirit. The person I may or may not become in a magic room of magicalness isn't actually who I am or who I would be in the real world, nor who I would want to be. My baser nature is an aspect of me. It's an aspect of all of us, but it's not actually me. Do I want to denigrate my children's mother and impact her in a negative way? Do I want to take away the joy she currently has in her life? Not really, no. I have no real want or need to try and destroy her or steal her joy. Again, I'm not her biggest fan, but it doesn't mean I need to see her in flames either. But if I could do something consequence-free without impacting her or me, do you really think that's something people wouldn't take advantage of? Something I wouldn't at least be tempted to do?
You think you're the best engineer in the fleet. Well, I've wanted to say something to you for a long time. You are the best engineer in the fleet!
And everyone watching this, every single person who is not a psychopath has someone else they feel similar to. So we're all in the same boat. Now, the natural counter to this argument is that the humans of the Trek era are supposed to be evolved, above the petty stuff. To be fair, I do think there is an evolution of humans in Trek. They are all effectively Mary Sues in one way or the other. In some ways, they have overcome some of their baser attitudes, but not all of them. And that doesn't mean emotions can't build up, that the baser elements can't actually occur. We see these elements in the original series with racism, in The Next Generation with anger, in Deep Space Nine with vengeance. Voyager has the anti-hero captain that delights in the pains of others. This all is a common subtext, so nothing here is out of bounds of the reality of the Trek universe, and it's all something we can honestly empathize with. So I hope I've addressed this in one way or another.
I don't want to do a movie!
That's okay, you were kind of a Zahn, to be honest. You probably weren't going to make the final cut.
Who's Zahn?
Exactly.
Oh, I've always wanted.
Let's get into the actual story. This episode is probably the greatest culmination of Mariner's arc that could have ever occurred. My biggest complaint with it is that it took way too long to get here. This should have been slated in the episode 6 or 7 slot. The fact that they held this back the way they did is a detriment.
The lizard men will no longer be subject to rat oppression.
This story begins with our girl Mariner freeing people from oppression, stopping this society's norm of one side eating the other. She is, of course, breaking the Prime Directive and is incensed when Captain Freeman comes at her for breaking it. However, there is a piece here that is often missed. The captain, after chastising Mariner, turns and offers Starfleet technology so that these people don't have to eat each other. To be clear here, Captain Freeman takes a Prime Directive infraction and doubles down on it by giving replicators. This is what Mariner did in the very first episode, but Freeman is hellishly worse here. Again, she's giving replicators. All we ever see Mariner doing is giving farmer tools. And to quote our boy Boim Boims,
selling Starfleet technology without the express consent of the Federation Council is the breach of Regulations 498 and 756.
Okay, look, will you stop eating these guys if we give you food replicators?
I don't know. Can they make nutrient pellets?
Yes!
Moving forward, Mariner is forced into therapy, and after being told she needs to find an outlet for her feelings, she decides to take over Boimler's holodeck program where he perfectly recreates the entire crew. This ultimately culminates in the holodeck movie, Crisis Point. Mariner plays the part of a vagabond, a pirate, that wants to take out Captain Freeman. She battles her way through the Caritas, killing or injuring everyone that she comes upon. A nice touch is that she is so consumed with her pain and anger that she stereotypes Tindy, who isn't having any of it, calling her out and leaving. It's honestly a great scene. Mariner finally gets to her mother, who...
All surviving crew, emergency evacuation protocol, Delta Echo. I'll keep systems functional for as long as possible. You can do this. We can do this. Cerrito strong!
is trying to save the crew. Again, we see the captain that, when things get real, she does what it takes to help people. She does take credit for things. She likes to put herself in the limelight, but she also really does care about those under her command, at least when she's not blinded by her ego. This leads to the climax, ultimately, where we see Mariner take on herself. It is so good, I'm not going to be going that deep into it. But let me use my example again. Let's say that I found the magic room of magicness, and the person who was married to my ex appeared before me. Not me, but who I was then. This person might remind me that there were good times, that my ex did help me here and there. To remind me that who I might try to be when no one is watching, consequence-free, might not actually be worth it. That there is value in being who I really am outside of this magical room of magicness. Sometimes we get so lost in the negative, we forget the positive, and so we need to remind ourselves of who we are to bring us back. Ensign Mariner learns this in probably the most spectacular way ever. Of course, that isn't the end of this entire episode, as Boimler finds out that Mariner is the daughter of the captain, and I'm going to gloss over the rest.
I know this is crazy, but you want to just, I don't know, run away together, and we can get our own ship, and we can buffer the phase coil whenever we want, or realign the matrix. We can fix the warp engines on our time. It would be an honor, sir.
Godspeed, you crazy f***.
So, does Captain Mommy give you, sweet little Captain kisses? Mwah.
What's up, Lore Masters? One of the things that I really enjoy is when a show or story has a really satisfying end. For me, it's the mark of a good writer and a good showrunner. Allowing the story to end is a strength of those who work on it. And a great example of this is Lower Decks, No Small Parts. This episode takes everything we've watched up till this point and really gives it a satisfying resolution. In fact, it's done so well that I'm somewhat concerned about Season 2 undoing the natural progression of this season.
Who wants crayons? Here you go, kid. Way better than the Red Hour.
Since when do you break protocol?
I'm just tired of you getting to do all the good stuff while I stick to the rules.
The episode starts off with Boimler finally accepting that you can be somewhat laid back with the rules and still be a good Starfleet officer. Of course, a laid-back Boimler makes mistakes, which sets us off on the A-plot that ties directly into the B-plot. Ironically, this is one of the only times you see the two connect so well. Breaking down the arc in a vague way specifically, a lot of the episode is Mariner accepting that she's the daughter of a captain. This episode has her confronting that she is, as Boimler points out, Starfleet royalty. The only real piece I don't like is that the entirety of the crew begins to suck up to the beautiful person of color. To be fair, I would expect some to start doing so, the XO being a fine example of this, but the rest of the crew? They've never really shown that character flaw. If I'm being honest, we don't see the entire crew, so maybe it's just a select few that are doing it. It's just a shame that this includes most of the senior officers. Ultimately, it breaks Mariner to the point that she decides that she will attempt to get transferred off of the Cerritos where no one knows her.
Good call. I'd better start adjusting my attitude. Sir.
Ew, don't call me sir.
Yes, sir.
Don't.
You technically outrank me, sir.
What are you doing? Stop it.
Is that an order?
Yes. I mean, no.
Permission to go to my station, sir.
You have a station?
Haha, good one, sir.
Whether this is on purpose or just to annoy Boimler is still up in the air, but it creates a great confrontation with the two ensigns. Boimler points out Mariner should move to be a great officer because she is one, not to get off the ship, nor to annoy him.
You're always telling me to be like this.
I meant to actually try sometimes, not to profit off of nepotism.
Nobody would know Freeman's my mom if you hadn't ratted me out, so why don't you go ahead and blame yourself?
Also, it's really funny. If you're observant, the female ensign starts acting exactly like Boimler and doing exactly what he does, including speed walking. It's kinda awesome. We see her drop the facade though when the ship is in danger, when her friends and the vessel are about to be destroyed, which is a constant running theme. That she, like many others in the series, may screw off and not do their jobs, have buffer time, but when it comes down to it, they do what it takes to save those they care about. On that note, this episode, like the last one, is a really great piece when it comes to the captain. Captain Freeman is arrogant, glory-hungry, and severe. She is also competent, cares about her crew, a great diplomat, and should be in the captain's chair. In this episode, we get to see her using her diplomatic skills. We get to see her making the right calls to ensure that her ship isn't destroyed, unlike another captain that we see. She identifies the threat and the best option to keep everyone alive.
You know, we can't just assume people are gonna keep doing the right thing a generation down the road.
I agree.
Moving to the B-plot, it really brings an issue to light. Starfleet, throughout Legacy and Disco-era Trek, will fix a problem, or ignore it wholesale, and then never address it again. This entire episode is an analysis of why doing that is a problem. From Beta 3, where the people just go back to who they were from the original series, to the Pakleds. Starfleet's egotistical attitude and almost non-interference shows that you really have to be committed to one way or the other. You either have to be all hands off and watch babies and burning cars die if their mom hasn't figured out warp drive yet, or be willing to be there and actively monitoring to make sure that after you've interfered, you haven't pushed too far in a negative direction. It's very nuanced. I'm not saying that it's not complicated. I just love that this episode explores it. We also see that if you always assume a race is going to be what they appear to be, like the Pakleds, then you will eventually be caught off guard when, somehow, they find a way to go outside their station. Looking at the secondary characters, I don't care all that much for Peanut Hamper, but I will say that I've never felt so much pain for a character that literally has had less than 8 minutes of screen time throughout the entire series than I did for the Chief Security Officer. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but damn. Ultimately, the Cerritos is saved, which I know it's spoiled to hell, but I'm not going to do that here. We see Boimler, Mariner, and Captain Freeman having very satisfying resolutions. Unfortunately, as is the norm, neither Tendi nor Rutherford really get one in my opinion. It's really a weak point. But overall, it is a good episode. It's a proper ending to a great season. I just really hope they don't mess it up in season 2. But all of these are my opinions. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Guys, I'm going to see you on the next Lore Reloaded.